KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that we really can change the world if we care enough.
First things first.
First things first, it's the DU General, Money B. I'ma put you up on the schedule, 6 to 9, 8 weekdays, not 2 and 7. Let's go. We got a lot to talk about, so much to pedal through. Unapologetically progressive. Tune to KBLA 1580 to get the mess. We're your ancestors' favorite radio station. First black on talk radio, left side of the nation. Me and Dominique DiPrima go way back. Smiley making sure the station stays black. Discussing all the issues in our community. We're hosted black and brown and others find unity. So let's talk about it. Maybe we can improve it. Digital underground, always down with the movement. So we tune in. The first things first with the queen of Black Talk Radio, Dominique DiPrima. Go sis.
First things first.
Good morning and God bless. Happy Monday. I'm Dominique DiPrima. This show is called First Things First. My first thing today and every day, giving thanks, giving praises, and asking for blessings from God, asking for the blessings of the ancestors and the elders, and getting it going. Not just your day, but your week, and mine too. I'm so happy and blessed to be here with you now. This is how we do things around here. Hour one, we go local. We look at what's happening on the left coast. Hour two, we look national, international, and beyond. In the third hour, we do a deep dive with a person of interest or hot topic, etc., etc., etc. Yes, it's post-election season, so we get back to our normal groove, more or less. And that in itself is a blessing. Today, in hour three, in honor of Women's History Month, I will be talking with Amina Baraka. She is a poet, an activist, an author, and also happens to be my bonus mom. And it's rare that we can coax her out of her space and onto the mic. So we're going to be hearing about heroes of Black history, and I cannot wait to get into that conversation. As usual, you're invited in every hour at 800-920-1580, 800-920-1580. We've got a lot to talk about. We always do, and you are part of that conversation. It's not a monologue. It's a dialogue. So get in on the phone or get in on YouTube. YouTube.com, KBLA 1580. Please like, subscribe, and all that stuff. Comment, get in that chat. And then, of course, you can also hit us on all the socials at KBLA 1580. Find me at DiPrima Radio, DiPrima, and then radio. Show me some love. I love you back. All right, well, let's get into our left coast hour here. Actually, got a familiar face in the studio. Y'all know my normal KBLA contributor. She is a labor organizer and an activist, Sherry Bell. Hey, Sherry.
Hey, good morning, Dominique.
Good to see you. Thanks for doing a little overtime
right.
this week. We're also being joined by a person who was born and raised in East LA. She was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom as the state labor commissioner back in 2019. And as labor commissioner, she oversees primary law enforcement agency for workplace protections. The labor commissioner's office actually has 20 offices all over the state, and they have about 500 folks who investigate and adjudicate all kinds of workplace violations, from unpaid wages to retaliation. And we are pleased to welcome Lilia Garcia-Brower. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Yeah, great to have you in. That's a big job. California's a huge state. It's kind of like being labor commissioner for a small country, right?
That's right.
Or a medium-sized country, actually.
That's right. That's right. Which is why it's so important for us to connect with community leaders like you to help us get this information out there and reach Black workers.
I make a funny face because I do not consider myself a community leader, but we're happy to share the platform. And, one of the things your bio says, and, Sherry's been really, really, wanting you to come on, is that part of what you have to do is educate workers and employers. What are we missing? What are we not? I'm sure that's like a 5-hour show, but let's start with the basics. What is it that most folks don't know that we should? And we'll start with workers and then go to employers.
Absolutely. There's a dynamic to the law that is important for every worker to understand, that employers have rights to organize their workplace and defend themselves as well. And so for a worker to assert their rights at work, they need to be proactive in documenting the hours that they work. When it comes to wage theft, it's about corroborating what the hours they worked and that they, in fact, weren't paid that time. These laws don't work on their own. These agencies, as you pointed out, were 500 strong for a state of 18 million workers. So we're a little understaffed, right, for the size
that's a lot
of
workers.
The problem that we have. So it's so important for workers to understand that they need to arm themselves with understanding their rights and then proactively documenting what happens to them at work. So if, unfortunately, an employer operates in bad faith and denies the facts, they'd have evidence to help support it, which is essentially the job of our agency. We work in the legal system, and we have to substantiate to the evidentiary record what is the violation that the workers experience.
It's the paper trail. It's always the paper trail, right? I started out in a very corporate environment in television, so I got real familiar with the paper trail real quick. But I'm sure you've organized workers through the Black Worker Center and other places. What are the things that we don't get? I mean, that the commission is really enforcing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's like the whole old schoolhouse rock saying, like, knowledge is power. So, it's hard to know how your employer is violating your rights if you don't know them, right? So I think it's really important, that's why it's a part of the mission statement of the Labor Commissioner's Office to do outreach and education. So folks should know what the legal minimum wage is, know what overtime is, know what double time is, know that, anytime you're under the direction and control of your employer, that's paid time. They can't say come in at 7, but don't clock in until 7:15, because you got to put on your uniform and stuff like that. So I think that part of when I was an organizer, we did a lot of know your rights trainings. So that way we can empower workers with their rights, and then so they can exercise them. If they exercise them, it was a problem, then that's when the power building come up, because we're going to have to hold people who violate their rights as a worker accountable.
So, Commissioner, how do you let's start with wage theft, because you mentioned that, and I know it's a big problem, but I believe a lot of us don't even understand what it is.
Yes, that is unfortunately true. Wage theft is when you offer your labor, or you give your labor to conduct provide a job, and that employer doesn't properly compensate you for that labor. It could be not paying you all your hours worked. In Sherry's example, that you come to work and they tell you not to clock in yet, or you clock out of work and then they ask you to do some more work after that time, and that time is not paid. It could be that they're not providing you your meal and rest breaks as mandated by law, and that can also be wage theft. It could be that you're not being paid the overtime. If you're working 6-7 days a week, those hours need to be paid at a premium pay. And if you don't know that you have those rights, unfortunately, there's a lot of myths at work. There's a lot of lies that are told to keep workers quiet and isolated. So part of us coming out on this show and the outreach that we do, we were out at MLK Fest this year for the first time ever, I believe, as an organization. It's so important for us to meet workers where they are, to provide this information.
Yeah, so that means that actually it's the company or the employer stealing from you because it's wages that you were meant to get and that you didn't get for whatever those reasons are. And Sherry mentioned the minimum wage and overtime and double time. And I think we get confused with that too, because there's the federal minimum wage, which is like $7 and something.
25. Yeah.
Right, $7.25. Ooh, that scares me.
Yes.
And then then we have a statewide minimum wage, but some cities supersede that with their own, right?
Yes. So the state minimum wage is $16 an hour. So you're not allowed to work for any employer and be paid less than 16. It doesn't matter if you're working by contract or you're by piece rate. That employer has to ensure that they're paying you at minimum $16 an hour. And as you mentioned, there are certain localities that have a minimum wage. So I think in the city of LA, it's something around $17.90, I believe, is the new minimum wage in the city of LA.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So if you work in the city of LA, the employer is not allowed to pay you less than that local minimum wage.
So the local minimum wage, whether it's a city, the state, the local wage supersedes the federal minimum wage. If the federal minimum wage is $7.25, but California says 16, you got to pay 16 in California. If West Hollywood says whatever theirs is like, I think 18 or 17.75, then that's what you have to pay. It doesn't matter what the feds or the state says at that point.
That's exactly right. We will honor the higher minimum wage. So if that's the city or the county or the state, that's the wage we're going to enforce. We have stronger protections than at the federal level, so we are not accustomed of enforcing the federal law. We enforce state protections.
Okay, I got some other questions about the state, but before we pivot to that, we said we were going to talk a little bit about employers, the rights that they don't know they have.
Well, an employer has a right to defend themselves. They have constitutional right to defend themselves when they're being accused of violating a law. And the best practice for an employer, we did initiate a business engagement program in August of 2020 to reach particularly those small employers, those employers that can't afford an attorney, that don't have an HR department. A lot of times they make mistakes and they don't realize it. And we want to get to them, give them every opportunity to do the right thing. And so the best practice is to have things in writing, train your supervisors, have clear policies in black and white, communicate them to the workforce in a language, in a manner they understand, and communicate them regularly. So everybody's clear on what their jobs are and what the rules are to follow at work.
So if an employer doesn't know the rules and then they mess up, do they get a pass, or how does that work?
Absolutely not.
No pass.
Ignorance is not a defense. But we know
Unless
that
you're
small
Donald Trump.
businesses,
Sorry.
But we know that small businesses are the backbone of our economy.
I see.
And so we have a duty to get out to them, and we want to support those small businesses who are doing the right thing. And a lot of time, especially with the pandemic, there were new laws that were coming in place from the health department. And they were firing workers for the workers just asking for the mask, for the workers saying, hey, this patron isn't within 6 feet, or these folks aren't following these rules that have been mandated by the Department of Health. And we had fired workers who were just trying to protect their life and that of their family by following these rules. So we had to communicate to these employers that this isn't optional, that you put this individual back to work, or there could be a $10,000 penalty that you're being faced with, aside from whatever else wages you may owe this individual.
Wow. Now all that stuff is gone, right? All the lockdown, the sort of emergency stage of the pandemic, all those rules are now no longer in effect, right?
Yes, in terms of masking and social distancing. However, we still have health and safety rules and retaliation rules and wage rules that bring significant penalties for employers if they're violated.
Sherry, where do we go if we want to educate ourselves more, either as employers or workers? Actually, this question is for both.
Yeah, so some people call. So when I ask people, have you ever heard of the Labor Commissioner's Office? Many people say no. And some people call us the Labor Board. But that's not the correct name. It's the State of California Labor Commissioner's Office. And they can we at your fingertips, literally from your smartphone, you can find out a wealth of information about how to file a claim, your basic rights, by going to dir.ca.gov. And from there, you can find your local district offices, and our lobbies are open, and you can go in and talk to a rep at the desk if you're not really tech savvy. But yeah.
For workers, I'd also refer you to the website wagetheftisacrime.com. That has, as Sherry said, a tremendous amount of information, but really focuses in on what workers can do to defend themselves against wage theft. And in fact, you won a judgment and the employers failed to pay it, what it is you should do at that point.
We got a lot to talk about, and you're invited in if you got a question or conversation. 800-920-1580, 800-920-1580. Sherry Bell is here, and California Labor Commissioner Lilia Garcia-Brower is with us, and we got a lot to cover. Let's get it together on the workplace, on the job, or if you're an employer, you want to stay locked in right here. KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
I'm going out with the girls this weekend. Nails done, outfit stunner, and my skin, I know it's going to be glowing because I glammed up my shower routine with new Olay Indulgent Moisture Body Wash. It smells so luxurious and moisturizes deep into my skin with its super rich, creamy lather that's bursting with vitamin D3. So my skin glows and my confidence grows. Try new Olay Indulgent Moisture Body Wash for glowing skin in just 14 days.
We're with Bridget, whose husband won't be home for months, and whose daughter is due any day. We're with Mike, who's leaving home to protect his family and yours. We're with all service members and their families who need community, connection, and maybe a bit of magic. Are you with them? Learn more at uso.org today.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Ariva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Ariva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Imagine with me here for a minute the most beautiful panoramic setting. Maybe it's an endless ocean, waves crashing on a beach, or a crystal clear mountain lake, peaceful and quiet. Or maybe it's just little kids playing in the park down the street. Wherever your imagination takes you, now imagine right smack in the middle of this perfect picture, a piece of litter. Just one piece right there in the middle of it all. Doesn't exactly fit, does it? In fact, even though it's just one piece, now it's all you can see. That one piece ruins everything. And that's the thing about litter. It doesn't take much to ruin everything. One thing's for sure, it simply does not belong anywhere in California. So here's the good news. If we work together, we will change it. We don't have to let litter, even just one piece, ruin your perfect picture. Not anymore, not ever again. Clean California, zero litter is the goal. Brought to you by Caltrans and CleanCA.com.
Your ancestors' favorite radio station, and your favorite morning show host. Let's get back to Dominique DiPrima right now.
And being joined this morning by our friend Sherry Bell and California's Labor Commissioner Lilia Garcia-Brower. Lots to digest here in understanding your rights as a worker and understanding your rights and responsibilities as an employer. So we were talking about, minimum wages, and good to know the state is 16. What if your local city says more, then it's more, but if your local city says less, then they're breaking the law.
That's right. They can't go below $16 an hour.
Yeah. So if someone's offering you less than that, they are illegal. They're out of compliance. And we would go to wagetheftisacrime.com
Yes.
to learn more about what we ought to do. If I'm an employer, Commissioner Garcia-Brower, what should I do to educate myself? I'm particularly speaking of the small businesses you're talking about. Me, myself, I have a small business, but generally I would hire, very few people, right? I don't have regular employees. But if I was to branch out to that, where do I start to make sure I don't mess up?
Well, as Sherry mentioned, going to our website, dir.ca.gov, has a wealth of information. They can also email our business engagement program if they have a particular questions at makeitfair@dir.ca.gov. We have regular employer training programs that they can participate in. And if you belong to a particular network of, home restaurant, small restaurant employers or fashion employers, you could reach out to us and request a particular training at one of your association meetings.
Okay, so you can actually, like, whether it's probably a chamber of commerce or some kind of business association, you can invite someone from the Labor Commission to come in and kind of get you up to speed.
Absolutely. In safe space, we will come in, understand what your questions are, and provide that information. And we're not wearing our investigator hat at that point. At that point, we're there to help you understand what the law requires of you. And if there are particular questions about the realities of your operation and where you're struggling to meet that requirement, we can explore some options.
Yeah, I'm seeing on the website here for employers that you guys help people learn how to get whatever licenses or certifications that they need to be in compliance, and what postings, all that kind of stuff, because there are some basic stuff, right, including even workers' compensation.
Absolutely. And oftentimes employers don't know who to ask a particular question, right? Or they think, I don't need workers' comp until I have 5 employees, etc. But you employ one person, you need to provide workers' compensation to cover that individual. So these are the types of questions that we can respond to in one of our business engagement trainings.
Yeah, I also see for workers here, one of the things that's here is reporting unsafe working conditions. And we've touched on that with COVID. But what about retaliation? Like, a lot of times, if you are that one, that squeaky wheel that's speaking up about the COVID conditions or trying to unionize your shop or complaining about unsafe conditions, you are the one. I mean, Starbucks just got in trouble for that with the federal labor board, which I know that's not the right name, Sherry, but they just got in trouble for that. In fact, they have to give some folks back their jobs, right?
That's right. So we do not enforce health and safety laws. That's enforced by Cal OSHA. But we do enforce the retaliation protection that comes with those health and safety laws. So a worker is protected from exposing any kind of safety risk at their job, and expecting their employer to give them a way to do their job without exposing themselves to physical harm. And if the employer takes a negative action, cuts their hours, demotes them, assigns them more work because they exercise that right, that's retaliatory and against the law. And that's where a worker would come forward to our office and denounce their employer for that activity. So what's foundational to retaliation is for workers to understand that they need to exercise a protected activity that is provided to them by law. So as I just reviewed, them having a safe work environment is a legally protected right. Them being paid for all of their hours worked is a legally protected right. Them asking to use their paid sick time is a legally protected right. If an employer takes a negative action for them exercising these rights, that is against the law. And they have the right to recover whatever wages they lost and possibly additional penalties that go to the worker.
You want to add to that, Sherry?
I mean, yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell. And just, best practices for like when you're exercising those rights as a worker is try to do so with a documentation, like maybe sending an email with a request or a text message or, and do it.
And then keep a copy of that.
Yes, and do so in a professional manner, of course, because you don't want to give them a reason to be like, well, she yelled at me,
Right.
So there's you have rights and you have the right to exercise them, but there's like little caveats. But I'll point people to the Wage Theft is a Crime website. It's an excellent brochure on retaliation that explains it pretty well. It's just that the brochure says that you have 6 months to file from the time of the act of harm, but it's now 1 year. But all the other information is correct, and yeah.
And just to reiterate what we said in the beginning of the show, employers have rights.
Yeah.
And that's what Sherry was referencing, that it is so important for you to know what the employer's rules are in operating their business, because they have the right to enforce those. So let's say if an employer says, if you're going to be late, you need to call in 10 minutes before you're late. And if you don't do that, you're violating a rule, and they may have the right to fire you or to suspend you for the day. And if a worker complains about not being paid overtime 1 week, and then the next week they don't follow that rule about calling in before they're late, and then they're late, the employer may be protected in firing them.
Okay.
In reality, it's retaliation.
Okay, hold that thought. We got more. This is getting interesting here. It's KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
We welcome you to a Monday. It's March the 11th. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The trial of a Michigan father charged in connection with a deadly school shooting carried out by his teenage son continues today. James Crumbley is charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter in the deaths of 4 students at Oxford High School in 2021 who were killed by his son. It's the 3rd day of testimony that follows 4 witnesses taking the stand on Friday. We're now learning an Alabama woman is expected to plead guilty in her own kidnapping hoax. Carly Russell, who is black, is expected to submit a plea at the Jefferson County Courthouse in 10 days. That's less than a year after she allegedly faked her disappearance in the Hoover area. She's facing 2 counts of making a false report. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Robert Half research indicates 9 out of 10 hiring managers are having difficulty hiring. Robert Half is here to help. Their recruiting professionals use proprietary AI to connect businesses with highly skilled talent. At Robert Half, they know talent. Visit roberthalf.com today.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A special day Sunday for the USC women's basketball program. The Trojans won the Pac-12 tournament championship for the first time since 2014. They also found out they can win a title game when freshman sensation Juju Watkins has a bad day. The nation's second leading scorer had only 9 points Sunday against Stanford. USC still won. The Trojans beat Stanford by 13 in Vegas. Guard Mackenzie Forbes stepped up with a game-high 26. USC should get a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. The brackets will be announced next Sunday. The Lakers beat Minnesota by 11. Anthony Davis is the first player in NBA history to finish with 27 points, 25 rebounds, 7 steals, 5 assists, and 3 block shots. The Clippers lost to Milwaukee. They played without Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. George has a sore left knee. Kawhi is nursing a groin injury. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Psst, hey, have a secret. I use Secret Whole Body Deodorant because more than just my armpits stink.
Oh, can I use it where my bra rubs under my...
Oh, yeah.
And what about down there? You know, my...
Totally. 4 out of 5 gynecologists would recommend it. So I tried it, and now I get 72 hours of freshness from my pits to my...
Ooh, I love that it's a spray.
Me too. And it comes in sticks and creams too. Go get your Secret Whole Body Deodorant.
Getting connected has never been easier. Get free Wi-Fi at all LA County library locations, inside the library and outside in the parking lots. Visit your local library and get connected today.
If you're looking for the most epic place on Earth, let's start at the base of a massive waterfall. Then trek through the thick jungle. Then climb to the peak of a snowy mountaintop. Then once you get there, keep going. Because with intelligent 4x4 and 7 drive modes and a Nissan Pathfinder, the search is the real adventure.
Available feature. Intelligent 4x4 cannot prevent collisions or provide enhanced traction in all conditions. Always monitor traffic and weather conditions.
So you just used bug spray in your home. Now what? Well, between the waiting and waiting for things to dry up and keeping your family away from the mess, it hits you. You could have used Zevo. Unlike other bug sprays that stick around, Zevo goes from kill to clean in seconds. Plus, it's safe for use around people and pets when used as directed. Zevo, people-friendly, bug-deadly.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment. LA's 99 neighborhood councils form the grassroots level of the Los Angeles city government. The system was created to connect LA's diverse communities to City Hall. While neighborhood council board members are volunteers, they are also public officials elected to office by the members of their community. Neighborhood councils advocate on issues like homelessness, housing, land use, emergency preparedness, public safety, parks, transportation, and sustainability. They also provide local expertise on the delivery of city services to their various communities. Neighborhood councils are open to participation by anyone who is a part of the fabric of daily life in said community. This includes those who live, work, or own property or a business. If you are interested in stepping up to join your local neighborhood council, visit www.empowerla.org. That's empowerla.org. It's time to think globally, but act locally. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
And we do appreciate you. We're talking labor. We're talking work. It's funny, too, because last night was the Oscars. And it was a moment on stage where Jimmy Kimmel brought up the crew, the IATSE folks who are currently in labor negotiations, who may be going on strike. Hopefully not. Hopefully they'll get their deal and they won't have to strike. But I love that solidarity moment. And then Jimmy Kimmel said, for all of our Hollywood airs and fakery, the bottom line is we're a union town. And I always say that because I think people underestimate Los Angeles, Southern California, and even California as a whole when it comes to worker protections. Do you agree, Commissioner Lilia Garcia-Brower?
Absolutely. I think California has some of the strongest protections, but these don't matter if we don't come together as a community and support each other. And as what Sherry was just mentioning, they don't work in isolation. The fact is, workers need evidence to win in the legal system. Agencies who are bringing actions on behalf of workers need evidence, need cooperation from the workers to bring forward those cases successfully. So it's not done in isolation. We got to come together, support each other in order to win and hold employers accountable.
Okay, but just to follow the thread where we were before we went to news, traffic, and sports, you have to know what you signed up for, what you agreed to when you went on that job, right? For example, I have a right to free speech, but Tavis Smiley owns the station. He doesn't allow, and also the FCC, they just don't allow you to get on here and do compound mother words. And, if I start dropping F-bombs, I'm out of here. I still have free speech, but there's an employee handbook. Is that kind of what you were talking about?
That's exactly right. Employers have rights to organize their business as they choose and to establish rules for their employees to follow, as long as those rules don't violate your rights. Right. So they can establish requirements around language, around dress code, around protocols if you're going to be late. And if somebody doesn't follow that, they do have the right to fire you or to demote you or to suspend you, as long as they're really not doing that because you were exercising a protected activity.
But if I was exercising a protected activity, say I was organizing in my workplace, or I was whistleblowing about some conditions that were problematic, and I violated something from the handbook, I don't have any protection, do I?
Yeah, there's a lot of nuances when it comes to these investigations. So one of the things is like, well, they have to show the reason why they fired you. So it has to be true. So they have to provide evidence to show what they're telling you and telling us as the reason why they fired you. They have to show that. Number two, did anybody else do what you did and not get in trouble? Right? And the only difference between you and them is that you complained and they didn't. That's disparate treatment. So like, say for instance, you've been late like 6 months. And nobody never said nothing to you. And then the moment you complain, you get written up. That's suspicious.
So you have to build a case, in other words.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very important to follow, document what happens at work, and don't wait until you have a problem. It's just a good practice. It's just like brushing your teeth every morning, right? We need to have good hygiene, right? Just to take care of ourselves. You have to have good hygiene at work. That means documenting your hours, being clear of what your employer's rules are, and understanding that a lot of people believe you're more protected if things are confidential. And that's another big myth. The legal system, particularly for retaliation, requires that there's evidence that you exercise protected activity and that the employer had knowledge that you exercised your rights.
So you mean the people think if they secretly complain, it's more protected. But in reality, you're better off being public about it?
Right. You're exposed if you think you're confidential. Right? And you say, no, I'm going to tell you here where my employer's cheating, but I don't want them to know it's me. Mm-hmm. Then how are we going to prove that you're exercising a protected right?
I see. Yeah. And I know you said you guys aren't Cal OSHA, so if we bring a complaint or a problem that's actually not within the California Labor Commission's purview, you would refer the person to where they need to go. So if I was to complain about something, whether it was unsafe working conditions or sexual harassment or something that may not be within your purview, it still doesn't mean that what happens if your employee just minimizes it? Because I think that happens a lot when people complain.
If your employer minimizes
your employer just minimizes it and says like, oh, it's not that big a deal.
Well, it is important to document who you reported it to at the employer, the date, time, their position, and what their response was. And then circle back to them to let them know if it happens again, that bring it back to them. You can't give up on yourself. You can't get tired of defending yourself at work, right? And doing it, as Sherry said, in a good faith manner, doing it respectfully, documenting that, then going to the agencies. If your employer isn't listening to you, then you're in a stronger position because you're going to show, look at 1, 2, 3 times I talked to HR and they ignored this issue. Then they're failing to comply with their legal obligation to ensure that you are safe while you work.
And this is every job. This is not just union jobs. This is not just minimum wage job. This is any job that you're at.
Yes, actually, our office enforces all laws that apply to all workers. We tend not to enforce collective bargaining protections. We're enforcing laws for those who do not have union protections. There are some narrow situations that a union protection comes in under a minimum requirement, and that may kick it into our jurisdiction. But for most of the workers that we protect, most of the laws we enforce, these are for non-union workers.
Yeah. And I do want to add, if you do want to file a claim and you are a part of a union, we ask that you produce a copy of your collective bargaining agreement to see if, there's any type of muddying of the waters. And I also want to add, when it comes to retaliation, it's over 45 different laws that we enforce, anywhere from taking time off to take your kid to attend a school activity, from going to court to get a restraining order for domestic violence, your employer not protecting you from a stalker, you telling them I have a stalker, and then instead they figure you are a liability and fire you for that. So there's you have to go to the website because, number one, people didn't know who the labor commissioner office was, a lot of folks, right? But then you really don't know all the laws that have, right?
I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
At least one of the things you just mentioned has actually happened to me, and I didn't even realize that was my right as a worker at the time, some while ago, long time ago.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because that would have never occurred to me. So you're talking about the wagetheftisacrime.com. Wagetheftisacrime.com. What about sick pay? What about sick leave? When, sometimes people don't want to honor that, or they want to pressure you.
Right. That's a great question, Dominique, because sick pay came into law in 2015.
Really?
I believe. But so many of us didn't know about it, right? Until the pandemic hit.
Oh,
yeah.
Right? And then there was supplemental paid sick leave. And then we dusted off the initial paid sick leave statute, which provided 3 days. So you had your 80 hours plus your 3 days, right? That people were trying to make them stretch to deal with COVID. Well, this January 1, 2024, they increased paid sick days to 5 days a year or 40 hours a year. So if you are sick, for preventative health care, for taking care of your child, your relative, getting your flu shot, you need time off work, you can use paid sick leave hours for that time. You do not need a doctor's note. You need to advise your employer of the time that you're going to be out, and your employer is to pay you that in your next regular paycheck. And it should be a line item in your check stub that shows you how much paid sick leave you used and how much you have left.
So that's not dependent on the employer's their policy or whatever. That's a state law. They have to give every employee 5 days.
A minimum of 5 days. An employer could give you more, but they have to at minimum give you 5 days, 40 hours. What is
per
in
year?
Per year.
Okay.
What is in the employer's purview is how they accumulate those hours. So the law gives them an option. They could either front load it at the beginning of the year, give you those 40 hours, or they could attach it to how many hours you work. So for every 30 hours you work, you get 1 hour of sick leave. And you're able to access those after 90 days being on the job with that employer.
Okay, so that's dependent on the employer's policy.
Yes.
But it has to add up to 5 days a year if you're working full-time somewhere.
Yes.
And I think a lot of us do not know that. I think those are things that we don't have to ask our employer because they're state law.
That is right. And there's also a rub with this development because previously employers quite often, my employer used to ask me for a doctor's note. Right? At my last job.
Yeah.
If you're out more than 2 days, you need a doctor's note.
Yeah, actually,
right?
I've had that at a job too.
Well, now under this new law, employers cannot ask you for a doctor's note as a requirement for you to be paid. Right? They cannot require you to submit a doctor's note in order to be paid. However, I'd like to flag for our wonderful public that it is important that if you tell your employer you're sick, and then you're on social media out somewhere having a good time, well, then you're crossing a line and triggering. They could fire you for dishonesty or committing some kind of fraud, depending on
or for
how
just
you
being an
reported
idiot.
that.
I mean, I think that's in most employee handbook. You can't be a total idiot.
Right. And just to say, it includes mental health too, right? Like paid sick leave is not only for your physical health, that of a loved one, because that's why sometimes you can't produce a note if you have like a
A very sick
depression.
child.
or something.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Or if you don't have insurance and you can't afford to go to the doctor,
Right.
which, I know we're supposed to have insurance, but not everybody does. We are talking with Lilia Garcia-Brower. She is the Commissioner of Labor for the state of California. We're talking with Sherry Bell. Y'all know her. You should. 800-920-1580 if you got a question or commentary, conversation. We are KBLA Talk 1580.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580.
If your Medi-Cal is ending, Cover California is here to help. Cover California is a service from the state that helps you get affordable health insurance. In many cases, at no cost to you, just like with Medi-Cal. We have quality health plans, and we'll help you every step of the way to get the one that works for you and your family. So, if you're no longer eligible for Medi-Cal, check out Cover California. We'll keep you covered. Learn more at coveredca.com.
Have you fallen behind on your water and power bill? LADWP has made paying your past due bills even easier. Sign up anytime online for Level Pay to get set monthly bills that include past due amounts. Or check out the special extended payment arrangements of up to 48 months to help pay down your bill. Visit ladwp.com/cares and sign up today. That's ladwp.com/cares.
Eggs are a staple in our diets, and there's only one egg with more delicious farm fresh taste plus superior nutrition. Eggland's Best. With more vitamins, including 6 times more vitamin D and 10 times more vitamin E, plus 25% less saturated fat than ordinary eggs. Available in so many delicious varieties. Classic, cage-free, and organic. Eggland's Best. Better taste, better nutrition, better eggs.
Watch out! You got me! The galaxy is safe once again.
In the pretend universe, kids play with pretend guns. In the real world, it's up to us to make sure they don't get their hands on a real gun. If you have a gun in the house, keep it locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Oh, this cold.
Honey?
Honey?
Honey, you need DayQuil Severe Honey.
DayQuil Severe Honey gives you powerful cold and flu symptom relief with a honeylicious taste, because life doesn't stop for a cold.
Okay, I'm ready to go.
Now I'm getting a cold.
Honey.
Try DayQuil Severe Honey for powerful cold and flu relief. DayQuil Severe with honey flavor. The daytime coughing, aching, stuffy head, fever, honeylicious, power through your day medicine. Use as directed. Keep out of reach.
Heard any other talk radio lately that sounds anything like this? We didn't think so. You're listening to Unapologetically Progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
We are talking with Lilia Garcia-Brower. She is the labor commissioner for the state of California. And we're talking with Sherry Bell, who's the labor expert for the KBLA Talk 1580. Look, James from the Conversation Live, who's also a correspondent here, is talking about this idea of comp time. And let me read it. In lieu of hourly wage, can employer offer comp time off?
James, that's a great question, and that's a fact-specific answer that I want to give you. So there's a lot of details about your work environment that we want to understand. You should contact our information line at 833-526-4636 so we can give you a proper response.
Got it. I mean, that's a good number to have anyway, in case you're confused. So let's talk about this idea of overtime, double time. When does that kick in? What should we know about it?
Overtime kicks in after 8 hours a day. in a workday, so it's a 24-hour period. If you work 8 consecutive hours or you work more than 8 hours in that workday, you're to be paid time and a half. So if we're going off the state minimum wage of $16 an hour, you figure out your time and a half by dividing 16 by 2, which is 8, and then you add 16 and 8, that's 32. No, that's 24.
24, yeah.
That's $24 an hour. So when you work more than 8 hours in a workday, you're to be paid $24 an hour for that time. And then if you work more than 12 hours in a workday, that's where you double the minimum wage. So 16 times 2 is $32 an hour. You also have overtime triggered if you work 7 consecutive days. And so the law says you have the right to 1 day's rest a week. And if the employer asks you to work that 7th consecutive day, that's fine, but they need to pay you at overtime your first 8 hours. Where normally, if we just reviewed, normally your first 8 is regular, right?
Right.
But for being the 7th consecutive day and you should have had a day's rest, the employer has to pay a higher wage rate. So they have to pay 18, they have to pay time and a half, $24 for the first 8. And then after 8, they have to pay double time.
Okay. And then it resets when you start your new week.
Yes. Well, it resets for, and on your work day. The other way that you trigger overtime is when you work more than 40 hours in a week. So if Monday through Friday you worked your solid 40 and then they ask you to come in on Saturday, that's going to go into 41, 42, 43 hours. Then that time needs to be paid at time and a half, $24 an hour.
Yeah. I hear the misconception that a lot of employers have, or at least that's what they tell their employees, that basically they don't understand that there's 2 separate buckets of overtime. There's daily overtime and then there's weekly overtime. So I've heard people saying, well, my employer said I worked 10 hours today, but I don't get overtime because I didn't work 40 hours this week. Mm-hmm. You know,
and that's not true.
That's not true.
As soon as you went over that 8 hours in that
Right.
day, it's overtime.
Mm-hmm.
And when you went past the 6 days in that week, it's overtime. So it adds up 2 different ways. And so what you're saying, whether they know better or they're just playing dumb, it doesn't matter. The law still applies. Yeah. Once again, we're documenting everything.
Absolutely. And it is not permissible for an employer to say, hey, you worked 10 today, so tomorrow come in 2 hours late and we'll call it even.
No,
right?
You don't get to call it even.
If you worked that overtime, they need to pay you that overtime.
Yeah.
Wow. California has a lot of protections that other states don't have, and you don't carry them with you. I found out because I have I have several friends that moved to states with fewer rights, like Florida and Georgia. And they found out you don't take those with you.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. In my previous job, I represented janitors, and I did some cases in Florida, in Nevada, in other parts of the country where you just have the federal law, the Fair Labor Standards Act, right? And so all the protections that we have in California do not apply in other states, right? It covers for work performed in California. Now, in this remote era, where a California employer can hire somebody who lives out of state but is performing work for in California, that is still covered. Or vice versa, the employer is out of state, but the employee is in California.
Oh, vice versa? I did not know that.
Yes, if the labor is performed in California, for either the employee works in California or the business is in California, then that is covered under California law.
What? That's why we call it the Golden State. Mess around and find out. But on the other sad part of that is if you actually moved yourself to Wyoming and got a job there, and then you were like, but I get 5 days of sick pay, it'd be like, nah, man.
No.
That you don't get to take that with you.
No, and it's important to look at, because not all states have a state program, right? Not all states have like a labor commissioner's office that enforces state law. So it's important for you when you move to that state to understand, do they have a local state Department of Labor, or is it just the federal Department of Labor? And by that chance, do they have any kind of county, right, or city type of programs that have been growing?
Because federal minimum wage is very low. One of the most like jacked up laws that I feel like that happens in the South, where a lot of those right to work anti-union states, is like they can use your tips and credit it against your wages.
That's so foul.
Yeah,
I've worked as a waiter. That's foul as can be. So you know what? Explain what right to work means, because people are confused about that. Like a right to work state, it sounds like, oh, I have the right to work, but it really doesn't really mean that.
Right. I mean, I think that's why it's so hard to like enforce the kind of laws that our agency enforces, because a lot of on a national level, locally and nationally, because a lot of states don't value or uplift workers' ability or to organize for better working conditions. So they make it extremely hard for workers to organize for better working conditions. For instance, a lot of the labor codes that were established in the state of California that our agency enforces were actually brought forth by workers organizing on the ground for change.
Okay.
And so when their ability is restricted and they make it super hard, those right to work states.
I mean, it basically means you can cross a picket line with, you don't have to join a union. You don't have to honor it. So anyway, time flies when you're on the radio. We've got about a minute here. Lilia Garcia-Brower. Isn't that crazy?
That
California
did go by fast.
What do you want to really emphasize? What do you want to leave us with this morning?
I think it's important for workers to understand you do have a lot of protections in California, but you need to know them, and you need to know how to use them smartly at work. And that is something that our office could help you understand. These laws do not work on their own. The legal system does not work on its own. And we have to remember, in this country, this legal system was not built for us. There have been a lot of people who have been historically excluded. And that's why we're committed to coming out here, meeting people where they are. Because if you don't know your rights, how are you going to protect yourself? How are you going to defend yourself? And so it's so critical for people to be proactive, get out there. Don't believe what you're told at work. That's giving the employer too much power. You need to educate yourself, go into our website, talk to your colleagues, go together with a community center, with a worker center to understand what your rights are at work. And the best practices in exercising them is speaking out and documenting it and working together as a community.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you. Lilia Garcia-Brower, California Labor Commissioner. She's talking about wagetheftisacrime.com. Always good to see you, Sherry Bell.
Thank you. Good to see you, and good to be in the presence of KBLA family.
Absolutely, and let's get paid in full in 2024.
Hello.
It's the perfect time to call me. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
We welcome you to a Monday. It's March the 11th. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The trial of a Michigan father charged. It's the third day of testimony that follows 4 witnesses.